This is John Henry Weston of LifeSite News coming at you from the Vatican. Very privileged to be in the presence of and the apartment of Cardeal Arinze, retired head of the Vatican Curia. Which department?
Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments.
Absolutely, and that is a specialization in the sacraments of the Church, including Holy Communion, confession, and so on?
Definitely, because the Holy Eucharist is the greatest sacrament, of course.
Beautiful, beautiful. We're very privileged to have you with us at LifeSite News. A few questions for Your Eminence. In recent weeks, we have heard the argument that conscience is inviolable and that we must respect that. How would you approach the question of communion for divorced and remarried Catholics or for homosexual couples in connection with the rights of conscience?
We begin by saying that conscience, according to Catholic teaching, is the dictate immediate of what is to be done or not to be done. Conscience directs the individual. Nevertheless, conscience has to be educated to see the ways of God, the commandments of God, as authentically interpreted by the Church, which means conscience has to be educated, has to be trained. Let's get the exact words of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It says in paragraph 1790, a human being must always obey the certain judgment of his conscience. If he were deliberately to act against it, he would condemn himself or herself. Yet it can happen that moral conscience remains in ignorance and makes erroneous judgments about acts to be performed or already committed, which means conscience does not make objective right and wrong, but only directs the person in what the person should do or not do. That conscience has to be educated, trained, if you wish. So the next paragraph says, 1791, this ignorance can often be imputed to personal responsibility. This is the case when a person takes little trouble to find out what is true and good, or when conscience is by degrees almost blinded through the habit of committing sin. In such cases, the person is culpable for the evil he commits. That means it isn't enough that conscience says, I can do this. If that conscience has been made blind by repeated acts that are evil, then the person is responsible for that erroneous conscience. That is also clear. Ignorance of Christ and his gospel, bad example given by others, enslavement to one's passions, assertion of a mistaken notion of autonomy of conscience, rejection of the Church's authority and her teaching, lack of conversion and of charity. These can be at the source of errors of judgment in moral conduct. You can see then, if a person is always stealing, if a person is always telling lies, if a person is always committing acts against chastity, the person may begin to get accustomed to such acts and no longer call them by their names. But a priest or a bishop has to help them to call good, good, and evil, evil, which means, although conscience should be followed, conscience should be educated. Suppose I say, in my conscience, I follow what conscience says, and I see that car, and I like it, and my conscience tells me it would be nice for me to take that car, and I go and take it. Or I go to the bank and take a big swipe of money. Is it enough that I say my conscience is right, it didn't blame me? The police will not be amused, and the judge will clap you in prison, you and your conscience. You can see, conscience has to be educated. The objective norm of right and wrong is God's eternal wisdom inserted in human nature, which we call natural law. You see, John Paul II said, when he visited Mount Sinai, he said, before God gave the Ten Commandments to Moses, he already inserted them in the human heart. The human being, across religious frontiers, knows more or less what the Ten Commandments say. Mistakes here and there, but most people will know that telling a lie is wrong, that taking another man's wife or husband is wrong, that robbing money from a bank or even from an individual is wrong, no matter what name you give it. False testimony in court is wrong. So you see, conscience can be educated, and it should be.
What must we do as administrators of the sacraments, especially of Holy Communion, how do we respect someone's conscience then? Let's say a divorced remarried person known to be such, or a homosexual couple comes forward, they say they feel right in their conscience. Shouldn't that then be respected by the priest or the bishop, and they should be given Holy Communion?
But you see, there is such a thing as objective evil and objective good. Christ said, he who marries a wife and sends her away, those are not the exact words, but that's the meaning, and marries another, Christ has one word for that person: adultery. That's not my word. It is Christ himself, who is humble and meek in heart, who is eternal truth. So he knows what he is saying. Now, the best way we can help a person is with truth. So it will be necessary in some charitable way, nice way, to help such people to realize their condition. It is not enough to leave them with their conscience. A good doctor who receives a patient with a big wound, a sore, the doctor knows what is to be done. Maybe clean some parts, maybe some injection, maybe medicines to be administered. But if the doctor says, the patient says he doesn't like these measures, he's happier with a bandage, so the doctor gets a nice bandage and bandages the wound, is he a good doctor? Does the wound get healed because the patient's conscience tells him that this is the nicest way to approach it? You see, reality doesn't respect what I think. So that wound, the doctor should treat that wound with the best medical science. That's the way the doctor will show mercy to the patient.
Cardeal Arinze, thank you so very much for being with us on LifeSite News. God bless you.
Thank you.